Hello everyone, this is Jack here from the Accelerator team, and this is part 2 of our sort of mini-series around Northeast-based B Corps. And we're talking to fellow Northeast-based B Corps such as Scott Logic here. Mm-hmm. I'm calling you Scott Logic as if you are Scott Logic himself. But we've got Graham Hobbs here, the Chief Strategy Officer at Scott Logic. How are you doing?
Good, thanks, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, so we've kind of been talking to other B Corp members around kind of how they're making business a force for good. Mm-hmm. But before we get onto that exciting stuff, I suppose it's worth explaining a little bit about what Scott Logic does and maybe a very brief history of the business.
Yeah, sure thing. We, in a nutshell, we build bespoke software for organisations, mostly in the UK, but also globally, a lot over in the States and up in Scandinavia. We help them with the software that they need that is unique to them to help their businesses operate better or create better experiences for their customers. And we guide them on how they go about making software an impactful contribution to their business. So our founder, Gary Scott, that's Mr. Scott Logic. That's
Mr. Scott Logic himself.
He founded the company back in 2005 up here in Newcastle, and his background was that he'd worked at Lehman Brothers in the city for I think about a decade or so, and he recognised that there was a lot of fantastic talent up here in the northeast that didn't want to be in London, and thought, well, hang on, there's these amazing people and this fantastic work. Why don't I connect these two together? Started Scott Logic to provide that kind of technology expertise and jobs doing that city style of work, the city calibre of work. Since then, fast forward however many years that is, 19 years, we're now 500 people with 6 offices across the UK. Newcastle's still very much the headquarters, but a lot of presence elsewhere in the UK as well. Doing, in my opinion, fantastic work with all sorts of organisations across financial services, in the public sector, where I can name lots of them. That's always the exciting part. Is like we're doing some fantastic programmes of work with the Scottish Government, with the Department for Work and Pensions, for the HM Land Registry, all these kinds of organisations that have a real impact on everyone's lives, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, there's an illustrious client list there, mm-hmm. And by the size of it, it's clearly a very successful business in its own right. And I suppose you're quite an interesting case study within the business itself. I mean, you're too modest to mention, but you were part of the first cohort of graduates that went through Scott Logic. And sort of fast forward, we'll sort of mumble how many years later, and here you are as the sort of chief strategy officer. Yeah. So it's clearly a testament to the recruitment process, but also how they nurture talent and individuals within the business.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always been a big part for us. We talk about why we exist, our purpose being to create opportunities and sustainable prosperity through technology innovation. And that's a lovely string of words, but it's true about every aspect of the business. I believe we create opportunities and sustainable prosperity for our clients. I believe we do that for ourselves as a business, but also for ourselves as people who work in that business. And mm-hmm. My story is one of exactly that. It's why I've stayed at Scott Logic for so long. I've had multiple career stages in one organisation, big career changes, because those opportunities have been, created for me both through the growth and development of the business, my own growth and development, and sort of what we're about and how we manifest. And that's, I'm very proud of the business and what we're able to do, and the fact that we get to do this for more and more people every year as we continue to grow and continue to have more of an impact. And I should explain as well, one of the really important things for us in our industry and amongst our competitor space is really common to heavily rely on contractors. And our business model from day one has been based around permanently employed staff. So I think I can count, it's just over my 2 hands, the number of contractors who've ever done the client work as part of our teams, and that's almost absurd in our industry to say that.
It's completely unheard of, isn't it?
But that's how we like to operate. It means we can nurture people. It means we can create those opportunities for them, but it also creates that sort of stable home where individuals can invest themselves back in with each other, but also back into the business. And it gives our clients the sort of the reassurance of when we say, we've got awesome people who can do awesome stuff for you. We know because we're invested in those people rather than that being a sales front. And that's, again, this is where we connect the sort of the impact we believe we create in multiple directions. All fits nicely into the way we set up the business, I believe, anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's fair to say that obviously all of this fantastic stuff you talked about came about before you became a B Corp. It wasn't as if you became a B Corp and went, I suppose we should be doing this sort of stuff. It's something that's kind of built into the DNA. But I'm interested to see kind of where you first heard of B Corp and kind of what appealed to you.
I'm going to roll back slightly before that, and
Fair
I'll
enough.
give you a slightly long story. It's a little bit self-indulgent, it's a little bit about me, but I think it tells that story of Scott Logic and how we got, I'll say, cited B Corp and how that became a thing that was relevant to us. So I joined in 2006, as I said, as a graduate in the first graduate program. The business was about a year old at that time, and I joined for the reason it was created. I didn't want to be in London, and I wanted to do that kind of work. And Tada here, right next door to where I'd gone to university in Durham, was a place offering me exactly what I wanted. Not only that, they were clearly sort of good people. They didn't just care about tech. They cared about wider things. They cared about people as well, and the clients we work with, which is not as common as I'd like in our industry.
Yeah, that's very true.
But then I, fast forward a couple of years, and I'm heads down, just trying to figure out how to do this thing that we do. And 2008 hit, and financial services was in fact, all of our client base at the time, including some of the investment banks, including Lehman Brothers, who overnight disappeared. And that had a huge impact on us as a business, because that's suddenly a significant client base gone. And yet we survived. Yes, it was painful, but the way that Gary had set up and operated the organization from pretty much the very first day it had started meant that we could ride through that as a 3-year-old company, 35 people, and yet we were able to weather those storms and come out the other side prospering, growing even further as an organization. And that was sort of my first glimpse of, well, hang on, this is a business that thinks about the long term. This is a business that is not just extracting value for one person or a number of people as shareholders, but is actually wants to exist into the future and for all the people who are sort of stakeholders in that organization. So that was my first glimpse. And then, as we go on, I got the opportunity of sort of cross-training into design away from development, which is where I'd started, in part because the business was growing, but I saw this need with a client, and I thought, well, this is interesting, I'll teach myself. And then Gary turned around and said, cool, yeah, make that a thing. And I went, okay, build that up as a sort of a unit within the business, and expand that out. And in amongst all of this, there's a lot of what we were doing was a lot of thought leadership, so a lot of engagement out with the community, genuine leading edge R&D, so that we could contribute this not just to our clients, but to anyone who wanted to read our blogs or come along to talks we were doing or anything like that. Because again, that's a way of I think creating collective value, and that's a lot of what we're about, collaboration with people. None of us individually are fantastic, but put people together and suddenly you get amazing results out of it. So continuing on, and I guess the next sort of big step relevant to this story is in about 2018, suddenly actually some of the echoes from the financial collapse in 2008 came back in a good way for Scott Logic, and there could have very easily been an opportunity, frankly, for the shareholders to just go, yoink, we'll have that, thank you. But instead, they used that as an opportunity to actually do something that Scott Logic itself couldn't do as a business. So it seed funded something called the Altitude Foundation, which is a charity that's focused on raising the aspirations of people from less well-off backgrounds in the Northeast towards tech careers. Effectively a version of Gary's own story, coming from a background where a job in tech felt like a million miles away. Well, we want to close that gap for people up here, and that's where Altitude Foundation was born. But also funding a number of scholarships at Durham University, again aimed at individuals from less well-off backgrounds, to give them opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise. All this stuff was happening, and I started going, well, this feels like something that it's not just a token gesture, it's actually the real personality of this business coming to the fore. I mean, these are highlights reels, right? There's loads of other little bits and pieces going on, but I felt at the time that, okay, we've got lots of good people right from the top of the business down, and lots of good things that happen in and around the business, but where's the systemic piece? Where's the bit that makes that us as an organisation, rather than just a bunch of good people who happen to do good stuff? And fortunately, around the time I was thinking that way, Gary asked me to be a statutory director, and that sat there going, well, yeah, this would be great. This gives me the platform to systemically embed these ideas of sustainability and social value into our organisation. And it was around that same time, probably 2020, something like that, I stumbled across B Corp as a label, as a concept. And while I wasn't at all sure or convinced by the notion of the certification, I started going, here's an amazing collection of resources, insights, people, frankly, in a community who seem to have articulated something that ScholarLogic had never managed to articulate so succinctly and so clearly before.
But something resonated with you.
Absolutely resonated. I said, well, that's us you're describing there, just in words we've never used. So we didn't immediately say, well, let's become a B Corp. That wasn't the aim. It was, well, let's use some of this articulation. Let's use some of these tools. Let's start to fold this into who we are as an organisation, or as an articulation of who we are as an organisation, and then see what it means to us, see how true it is, kind of test it rather than have it as a statement of fact and then have to sort of wrestle the company to make that true. It was, well, let's make it true, and then if we want to pursue the label subsequently, then let's.
Yeah.
And so that we did get to that point. A lot of the B Corp journey for many organisations is typically to go and do the impact assessment first, and then worry about the legal changes and so on and so forth. We started using some of the bits and pieces, including some of the resources around the impact assessment, to improve who we were and how we did things systemically. A lot of it was, we do that good thing over there. Let's actually write the policy that says that's the thing that we do over there, to make it true rather than dependent on those individuals.
But I suppose a lot of people do that the other way around.
Well, exactly, yes.
They have the policy first and then go, well, actually, how do we do this?
Yeah, and that's what was so nice for me in our journey. It's never been a journey to B Corp. B Corp is it's a passing sign for us in that we feel it's an external validation of who we are and how we go about it, and a very succinct articulation. So instead of me rambling for 10 minutes like I've just done, we can just say we're a B Corp, and we can say that to clients, we can say that to our employees, we can say that to ourselves, we can say that to anyone who's potentially interested in working for us. And whether or not someone aligns with that and agrees with it is almost a side point. It is a clear expression of who we are and how we go about things as a business, and then people can choose whether or not that matters to them, which is sort of the important bit. So we created the legal changes first as an example of our, well, let's make this true before we state it to be true.
Yeah. So
the actual badge has been sort of the last piece. It's been the validation of, well, actually everything we've stated is true. We haven't. Nothing new has happened in the business specifically with B Corp in mind. It's how we've evolved, and that's helped us evolve that way.
And I think that's the right way of going about it, because I think more skeptical people behind B Corp or other things around sustainability and doing good things like net zero, for example. People might see that as a box ticking exercise, just like, we have to do this, so in order to get this accreditation we need to say that we do this, but the actions are clearly speak louder than the actual words or the validation. So kind of having it like we were doing this stuff anyway, and it just so happened that meant that we could become a B Corp or could be verified as a B Corp that's just great. But it was more, the stuff that we were doing was more important rather than the accreditation itself.
Absolutely. I think it's also meant that we, and I'd encourage every business to think this way, is there are things you are doing or could do that I would say are B Corp aligned. They're not a thing that B Corp would call out as, thou must do this, right? There's a risk that too many organisations follow B Corp rather than contribute into the notion of what it is.
Yeah.
So in our case, a really specific example that we're quite vocal about and have been for many years, well predating our awareness of B Corp, is the notion of open source software. So this is software that is freely available to everyone globally, and for the most part it is created and maintained without any commercial backing whatsoever. So there's a lot of, I'll say, volunteers. There is self-serving elements in there. It's a vast, complex world, but open source software, whether you're aware of it or not, makes up somewhere between 80 and 90% of all software running anywhere. From your car to your laptop to the internet, it's open source throughout it. And Scott Logic has always contributed to that, so contributed some of the code, helped maintain it, talk about it, support some of the foundations out there that create the communities that actually make this stuff stand up. And we've gone as far at times at a number of conferences to say, well, this should be on a tech organization's ESG agenda. We believe this is sustainability, this is social value in a way that a tech company should truly care about. It's it's our digital commons. It's the park that we all play in and we all get value from. We believe that's very unique to the tech industry. B Corp says nothing about it. And this is not me dissing B Corp at all, but I say the nice thing for us is I see that connectivity there, and I can start to articulate that. And I've had conversations with other technology businesses where they go, "Oh, yeah, we never made that connection. We never framed it in that kind of way." And I'd say that B Corp, again, as a tool, is really valuable in starting to frame the understanding of these things. This recognition of impact and value that you create beyond the four walls of your organisation, and think about how you can contribute to that.
And you've kind of touched on the community as well, sharing ideas.
Absolutely.
Because an accountancy firm or a cleaning firm or whatever, or a B Corp wouldn't be thinking about this sort of stuff, whilst and the stuff that they're doing may not be relevant for you as a technology business as well. But the fact that there are other communities and sub-communities within B Corp that you can have these conversations about and push the agenda and add to it, I think is really powerful.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we've kind of, in a roundabout way, gone through the journey. I suppose no, it's great, fantastic way of articulating it. I suppose is kind of what was the reception when the notion of B Corp was mentioned. Obviously, you talked about the legal changes, so that required going to Gary again.
Yep.
He was obviously immediately on board.
I wouldn't say immediately, but we got him there. Yeah. and just to be clear, so in Scott Logic, we have one shareholder, Gary. That's it. There's no other investment. There's no other backing. So it was a conversation with him, not quite as an individual, and he's a very family guy. It was a conversation with him, but therefore with his entire family. And his concern wasn't the sentiment behind the legal changes. It was, what are the legal consequences of this? What are we getting up with? Because the default for any business is that they have in their articles of association, it states that all directors have to consider all stakeholders, but primary among all of them is shareholders. And the B Corp changes take away that primary notion. It puts all stakeholders and the natural environment on an equal footing. And for Gary there with I'll say a £50 million revenue business, going, am I just making a legal change that gives all of this away to someone? So it was getting that kind of comfort. It's not the default in the UK. It's not the thing that all our lawyers and friends could explain to us. These are the consequences, because we've seen how this plays out over decades, which we have with the default article of association. We haven't seen that with these amendments that the B Corp requests. So that was the convincing that
Yeah.
was required. Is in my opinion very, very sensible convincing, because it's it's very easy to sign up to commitments and in good times or with good intentions, and then when the challenges hit, whether they be legal challenges or business pressure challenges to hit, I'll say effectively run away from those things. We are, I'll say, conservative in how we approach those kinds of changes, because we want them to be true, and we want them to be true forevermore. So, so in that sense, very risk averse to that kind of change. But at least as far as we can tell, it's all very sensible and it's all a good thing. And I feel confident that we can stay aligned to what's described there and what's prescribed there forevermore. And it doesn't change how we are as a business at all. That was the other part to it. It's like, this is how we're operating anyway. This just codifies it. Great, let's do it.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and then in terms of like other stakeholders, like the staff, customers, other suppliers, was there a lot of buy-in from that side?
So I'll be honest, we didn't consult with any of them. We felt as the group of directors that there was a good expression of who we are and what we're about. So we went about it, and I think I only broadcast it to our employees at the point where we submitted the impact assessment, when effectively we're on this train and it's going somewhere. I want you all to be bought in. And there was a lot of, I'll say, remarkably not dubious excitement. It was, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's totally who we are. And to me, that was actually validation once again. That
it wasn't like a what the hell. Like,
there was no what the hell. There was no, oh, this is the best thing ever. This will completely change the business. It was just, oh yeah, that is who we are.
I suppose that's the best validation you can get, because it's not a surprise. It's that makes sense.
Exactly.
We do we're aware of all this great stuff you do, so it makes sense that you just do this extra little bit and it helped, in again, it validated that notion that for us B Corp wasn't a destination. It wasn't a thing we were stretching towards. It was a nice step along the journey. It was validation of what we do and how we go about it. But then when we actually got the certification and we went public about it, we got wonderful reactions from clients. Potential employees suddenly had a very clear articulation of it, and it's genuinely just I'll say a badge of honour. It is no change, but it is sometimes literally a badge or a sticker or a sign that is able to articulate something very deep and very rich and nuanced about us as an organisation that we haven't found any other way to capture and communicate. I'll bring this question forward then, because I was going to ask it later on, but has there been a moment since you've had that verification, had the accreditation signed off, where it's been like a moment of pride that you've talked about? Has there been one particular moment you can pin down?
I wrote a blog post that probably a more articulate version of that journey I've described already, my journey and how that relates into the business. And that was the moment of reflection where trying to write that down, trying to explain with hindsight, what's the journey? And I went, not just the badge, but the things that the business has achieved and done, and the impact it has had over 15, 20 years. That was the moment of pride. I clicked publish on that. I went, that I'm really excited about that.
Brilliant.
So go and read that blog post.
And we're not the BBC, but impartiality. Have there been any challenges? Is there any particular sort of blockage, unexpected blockage or challenge that springs to mind where you go?
I have some frustrations with the B Corp impact assessment and some of the direction that it takes things on. A concrete example is a particular challenge for a business of our nature and size was the impact assessment looks for local ownership as one of the metrics. Like, that's a positive thing. Our business is owned by Gary Scott, who lives here in Newcastle, and our workforce is all over the UK. Most of it here technically most of it here in the northeast. but only, I think it's just short of 40% of the workforce is here, and therefore Gary being here means it is not locally owned, because we have 60% of the workforce that is not in the Northeast. I got really quite angry about that, because I think in the spirit of what I believe that is about, is that it's an understanding of the communities in which it operates, and I would say that's very true of ownership in our business, but not by the technicalities of the B Corp assessment. So there's little niggles like that. I think the other part for us that is that I've still personally struggled with is how much and how far we take these opinions and these beliefs to be about us, and how much we start to reflect them towards others. So it's B Corp aligned is the Better Business Act. I'm going to say group movement that's out there, which is the notion of making the effectively the B Corp legal changes, that making sure that by default all businesses have to consider all stakeholders in the round always, making that the UK default for any organisation or any business that's established. And I'm still torn as to whether or not I believe that's a thing that I could or should sort of, I'll say, lobby that others should do. I'm still very much in the camp where I think it's I'll say a personal choice. It is a business choice, and while it's absolutely the right one for Scott Logic, I speak to other B Corps and other people in the movement, and they're like, obviously, therefore, it should be projected onto others. I don't know if I'm that comfortable with that notion.
I get what you mean, because similarly, within the Companies Act, there's other stuff around directors are responsible for putting together accounts, even though, just because you've got businesses out there with directors that do bad accounts that don't. So, by logic, if you make that, they're going to do a bad job at this as well, because they don't care about it. So if they don't care about it, then
it will just create a disconnect. It will just be the wrong thing for those organisations.
It'll be a box ticking exercise.
Exactly, and I do also, coming back to this, the sticking point of sorts with Gary around this. We've had at least several decades of evidence of how the existing default articles of association operate and manifest into society, and some of that is very good and some of that is not so great, but all B Corps had those articles of association at one point in time. So I'm very nervous about the notion of, well, the thing that's there already is definitely not the right idea, we should change it. This is one of these dilemmas I'm personally dealing with. I think it's fantastic that we've got people projecting that and pushing this agenda. I think it's a wonderful thing to put out there. I just don't know if I'm personally at that point where I feel I can I'll say preach that to others.
Because I suppose the B Corp movement is kind of still in its early adoption phase, even though we've got 1,000 or so B Corps in the UK alone. That's a tiny percentage of overall businesses in the UK. So again, at this early adoption stage, should we be trying to be forcing that down people's throats? We need to be going down the route of getting the lower hanging fruit, the ones that are open to the ideas of it, and the ones that will come, if we're looking at the change curve, kind of the ones that are slightly further up from where we are, but rather than trying to capture the rest of them in one fell swoop through some change through the Companies Act. So it's it's a very interesting point.
But I love, this is where I've really enjoyed the community around B Corp is there's a real openness to multiple takes on the same point. You're not in if you want to push this towards other, and out if you're not. It is actually coming together and having these different points of views. To me, it's fantastic that there are a collection of organisations and individuals who do want to push this forwards. I think this country, this globe, frankly, needs it. But if everyone says and thinks exactly the same thing, we don't get the richness of debate and sort of variety of views that I think actually gets us towards better answers in the long term. So what I'd love most about the community around this is that acceptance of differences of views. So I'm not getting, I don't get chastised for saying, well, I'm not sure if I want to project that onto others. And that's healthy for everyone. That's what we need in our communities.
Absolutely. So last couple of questions then. I mean, first one is kind of, what are the future plans of Scott Logic, and where does B Corp sort of sit within that?
Yeah. Grow, prosper, create more opportunities, create more sustainable prosperity. That's such a woolly, noddy answer, but a lot of what for us, or for me, the way I like to talk about it is, so I'm a guitar guy. I love my guitars, and like every time we grow as an organization, I've got a bigger amp and a bigger amp and a bigger amp. So the way we act, the way we behave, the good things we do, manifesting certain good behaviors with guidance of B Corp or others, but a lot of that, we project that further and further. We can play a bigger and bigger concert. There's more and more impact that we're able to have to our clients, to the people we employ, to the communities we operate in, and so like, I guess I argue more is better on all those fronts, because I believe that they work in harmony for us. What we can contribute socially enhances what we can do economically for ourselves, but also what we can do for our clients, and sort of growing that positive feedback cycle between the three of them is really critical for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Spinal Tap, 10 out to 11.
Exactly.
All of that good stuff. And I suppose the last thing would be any advice for any businesses kind of at the very start of their journey, whether be it may not necessarily be looking at B Corp, because again, I think we both agree in the sense that you don't necessarily need to become a B Corp to be impactful. So is there any kind of guidance you would give to someone who's well-intentioned but just doesn't know where to start?
So I would say do look at B Corp, but not as I want to get to that end state, but there's phenomenal resources in there. There's the impact assessment, forget doing it, just looking at the things it questions is wonderfully thought-provoking. You can, as I did the very first time I looked at it, I went through and did, I care, I don't care, I care, I don't care, I don't, and it starts to give you some different dimensions with which to consider your business. But I think organizations could get too distracted by doing everything other than what they do as a business. And you do need to get comfortable and stable in what you do as a business, how you do it and why you're doing it. And I think a lot of things like the B Corp materials can help you enrich that and amplify it and start to connect that into other areas that maybe you hadn't considered. But don't do that to a distraction of the core of what you are, because if you can't establish yourself as a sustainable business in its own right, you can't have the positive impact more widely.
Exactly, yeah. So I figure that often gets sort of overlooked, isn't it? That there's the 3 Ps, and one of them is profit, unfortunately, and I think a lot of people, well, not unfortunately.
It's not unfortunately. No, that is. I think the analogy I've heard before is like, profit for a business is like the air that we breathe as humans. It's vital to exist. But if that's all that you're thinking about, you're not living a very rich life.
Yeah, exactly. If you're on life support, then the last thing you need to be thinking about is other stuff. It needs to be, yeah, you're right, a sustainable business.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time.
No worries. Thank you for indulging me.
It's been really interesting chatting to you. And obviously I heard you speak a couple of weeks ago, so I felt like this is the most prepared I've been for an interview ever. But it was very interesting to hear, and I'm sure our listeners will appreciate and enjoy listening to the story about Scott Logic and their journey.
Super,
but yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much. What do you think, guys? I mean, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on that. Obviously, we'll put your details in the bio so anyone can reach out to you directly, or Scott Logic. And if you've got any questions for us, just let us know.